Everyone, my name is Kayla, and today I'll be sharing how weather impacts my major. Currently, I'm a student at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and I am a business unassigned student. That means that I'll be entering a business major. Specifically, my interest is in marketing, which falls under business administration. In terms of how weather is related to my major and how it affects my major, I'm going to be talking about how it affects the retail side of things, and how it affects seasonal changes within retail stores, and how it affects the products that they have aligned in their stores and how it is merchandised. And I will also talk about how it affects a very specific field of business, which is the sports industry. So the first thing I want to talk about is how the weather affects marketing and merchandising. The weather, especially with different seasons changing, can definitely affect the way that products are merchandised, and that means that how products are placed in a store and where they are relative to how consumers walk in and make their way around the store. So for instance, during the winter months, you'll see a lot of stores put out shovels and ice, and all these other materials like gloves, hats, scarves, more towards the front of their store because they know that people will likely buy them because there is a high demand for them based on the weather patterns that we see. Now, certain weather conditions and patterns can definitely affect how people within these stores are merchandising products. So for instance, if we have an El Nino happening, which happens every 2 to 7 years in the equatorial Pacific Ocean, and that brings is very warm winters here in the northern part of the globe. So the Midwest especially, and pretty much all of North America will experience a warmer winter. What that means is that these stores now have to understand that the winter season isn't going to need as much ice melters or ice and salt products because there won't be as much snow during an El Nino season. Another way that it affects those stores is that they might have to put up the winter gear and coats and gloves on sale a little bit sooner than they thought they would. Because El Nino brings warmer winters, those products might not sell as much, and they in fact might have to put them at a heavy discount rate, around 70 to 90% discount rates, or sometimes even 50% off for gloves, scarves, hats, all these products that are typically associated with a winter season. Another way that weather can affect my major, which is marketing, and specifically the business field in general, is that it definitely affects how the demand for certain products can change. So for instance, during the spring season, we see a lot of stores coming out with spring-related products and bright colors, bright products also. So that can happen in terms of merchandising also, which a lot of stores are bringing out their summer clothes and like spring clothes, shorts, camisoles, and t-shirts, all these things, and most of the time they're placed next to products that are also related to spring-like activities. So for instance, in the spring it is known to rain a lot here in the Midwest, so they put umbrellas and like rain jackets, boots near the products, near the forefront of a store, just to make sure that customers are seeing products that will be useful for them in that season. So that can definitely affect, the weather patterns could definitely affect how products also sell within certain regions. For instance, across the Midwest, there are very severe and very cold winters typically, but not so much in areas like Florida. So certain retail stores and just stores in general, will change the product assortment that they have in those stores. So for instance, if you go to a Target in the Midwest in the middle of December, you'll likely see all those scarves, hats, salt to melt the ice. And then in Florida, if you head around there around the same time, mid-December, you probably won't see much of that. If anything, you'll see probably some lighter jackets, but most of the time it's not going to carry winter boots because they don't get snow in that region of the United States. So that's important to keep in mind when it comes to understanding how weather is affecting the business arena of things, specifically the retail side of things. Another way that I'd like to analyze how weather affects the business world is how it affects the sports industry. Sports, specifically that are played outdoors, so for instance, baseball, football, soccer, and tennis and all these other sports, but those particularly are the ones that are most popular in the States. How it affects those is that, for instance, baseball season just started the other week, and it was rained out here in the Midwest. The first couple of games were rained out because we had a lot of thunderstorms and lightning and all these things that are negative for a game. So what ended up happening is that these stadiums had to cancel their games and reschedule them for another time. Now, this definitely affects the revenue of a stadium because those tickets, some of them might have to be refunded. And what we don't think about also is that it affects the revenue for the businesses inside the stadium. So for instance, all the food courts and merchandise shops, all of those will see a negative impact due to these weather conditions, especially if we are talking about rain in soccer or football or baseball. There won't be as much of a turnout when it comes to seeing people at those games because obviously people don't want to be rained out. So definitely affects the stadium's revenue in terms of ticket sales, but also the businesses within that stadium, which is important to note because if there's a season where there's a lot of heavy rainfall and that's a persistent weather pattern for, say, the spring, which is the start of baseball season, then we'll see a lot of games being canceled, especially if there's lightning and thunderstorms. But we'll also see that those businesses are suffering as a result of it, and it could definitely affect the revenue of the stadium at the end of the year. So another way that I'd like to talk about how weather affects my major is that it could definitely affect, say, for instance, when it comes to understanding the demand for products that are coming out of season. Going back to that retail example, a lot of the products that we see go on sale around winter time are all the summer clothing items and all the summer related gear, flip-flops, for instance. I know a lot of stores also put their sunblocks and all these like beach towels, all these things on sale when it comes to winter time because they know that these products aren't going to sell as much during the winter. And so they put them on sale. So as consumers, we should be very wary of that because we should understand that these are products that are heavily discounted, and maybe it's a good time to stock up on them. So that is one way on the flip side of having increased sales due to the weather patterns and the seasons changing. We can also see a decrease in sales due to the same weather patterns and phenomenons that are happening. So that is another way that the weather can affect the sales of products and the revenue that these companies have as a result of them. Sometimes having those discounts can also mean that the consumer is more likely to purchase that item, for instance, and experience it. So I can testify to that. For instance, I bought a sanitizer the other day that was specifically made for people that have dry skin in the winter. And that's something that I found very useful for me, and I never would have bought it had it not been the end of the winter season coming into spring. So it was heavily discounted, and I would have never tried that product had it not been on sale during that time. So it can definitely affect how consumers are willing to try new products during the certain seasonal changes because they know that they will be heavily discounted. So that about wraps up my points in terms of how weather relates to my major and how it relates to the business field. I mentioned that it relates to how the retail side is changing its products and how it affects how products are sold and moved around the store. I also mentioned how it affects the business industry, specifically when it comes to the sports industry. So those are the two areas that I believe greatly affect the field of business.